How old are they now?
19 and 17.
And what are they up to? Are they following in your high-heeled footsteps?
He's had dancers, supermodels, and actresses, the kind of fleeting romances that burnt hot and disappeared by morning. Slash didn't just play guitar like a rock god. He lived like one too. Fast, loud, unapologetically well. Women came and went like encores, each one more glamorous than the last. But now, at 59, with the chaos mostly behind him, the top hat-wearing legend has dropped a confession no one was expecting. After decades of headlines, heartbreaks, and backstage whispers, Slash has finally revealed who the real love of his life was. And it wasn't any of the women splashed across magazine covers. Slash's difficult childhood. Before the fame, the women, and the wild nights on Sunset Strip, Saul Hudson was just a restless kid from London, with a chip on his shoulder and nowhere to put it. Born on July 23, 1965, in Hampstead, he spent his early years in the quiet suburb of Blurton, Stoke-on-Trent, far from the chaos his life would eventually become. But the silence wouldn't last. At age 6, Saul left behind the rainy streets of England and followed his mother across the Atlantic to Los Angeles, California, where the world around him and inside him shifted completely. His roots were anything but typical. His mother, Ola J. Hudson, an African-American fashion designer and costumier, dressed legends like David Bowie. His father, Anthony Hudson, an English artist, moved in music circles as well, designing album covers for stars. Slash, as he'd later be known, came from two very different worlds, black and British, and he knew it. He once reflected on the irony of being both. How British musicians often imitated black Americans, while black American artists seemed to chase British cool. For him, it wasn't an identity crisis, it was fuel. While his mother chased careers and contracts in LA, young Saul bounced around. First raised by his father and grandparents in Stoke, he later rejoined his mother in the US, only to watch his parents separate in 1974. The fallout made him a self-described problem child, a title he earned honestly. He lived with his mother but often stayed with his maternal grandmother when his mom's work took her on the road. Those early years in LA meant more than just school and survival. They also introduced him to a world buzzing with celebrities, tagging along with his mom to fittings and backstage moments. He caught glimpses of the rock world before he ever picked up a guitar, and it was around then that Saul became Slash. The nickname came from actor Seymour Cassell, who said the boy was always zipping from one place to another, a kid in constant motion. It stuck, and so did the energy. But the moment everything changed wasn't a glamorous red carpet event. It happened in a girl's bedroom when he was 14. He had one goal: to finally get with this older girl he'd been chasing for a while. They smoked pot, turned on Aerosmith's Rocks, and something unexpected happened. The guitar hit him harder than the pot or the girl ever could. He didn't even bother hooking up. He rode his bike back to his grandmother's house in a daze, knowing that he'd just discovered the thing that would define him: music. That album didn't just play in the background. It rewired his brain. In that moment, Saul Hudson didn't just want to be someone. He wanted to shred. In 1979, riding the high of his new obsession, he decided to form a band with his friend Steven Adler. The band never really got off the ground, but the idea stuck. Adler had already called dibs on lead guitar, so Slash, still just Saul, picked up a bass instead. That plan didn't last long. One lesson at Fairfax Music School changed it all. When he heard his teacher Robert Wolin play the Rolling Stones' Brown Sugar and a Cream tune on guitar, the sound lit something up inside him. It was raw, electric, and totally untouchable. Saul instantly knew he was supposed to be a guitarist. Armed with a flamenco guitar gifted by his grandmother, he began taking classes. His first real breakthrough was learning Come Dancing from Jeff Beck's Wired album, an experience he later described as F*** King Awesome. At that point, Slash ditched his BMX bike even though he was a champion rider and threw himself into guitar like a man possessed. He practiced up to 12 hours a day, fingers blistering, ears ringing, but heart full. There was no plan B. School barely held his attention. He attended Beverly Hills High alongside future legends like Lenny Kravitz and drummer Zorro. But while most students were still figuring themselves out, Slash had already made a pact with his guitar. This was it. This was the way out. From a chaotic childhood split between continents, backstage glamour, and personal chaos, Slash didn't just stumble into music. He chased it down with everything he had, like a man running from fire, only to find his salvation in the flames. Slash's music career. By 1981, Slash wasn't just dabbling in music, he was all in. He joined his first band, Titus Sloan, and dropped out of high school to hit the road. There was no turning back. For the next 4 years, he was a fixture in LA's gritty, glam-fueled rock scene, bouncing between bands, chasing the next big thing. One of those bands was Hollywood Rose, a wild and unstable mix of raw talent and chaos, featuring two names that would soon become legendary: Axl Rose and Izzy Stradlin. Hollywood Rose didn't last long, but the chemistry between the three was undeniable. So when Rose and Stradlin formed a new group in 1985, they called up Slash. And just like that, Guns N' Roses was born. Alongside bassist Duff McKagan and drummer Steven Adler, the band began hammering out the songs that would soon make them global icons: Sweet Child O' Mine, Paradise City, and Welcome to the Jungle. It wasn't just music. They were scripting the gospel of a generation: loud, dangerous, and irresistibly reckless. By 1986, they'd landed a deal with Geffen Records, and in July 1987, Appetite for Destruction exploded onto the scene. It didn't just shake up the charts, it shattered them. The album became the best-selling debut of all time in the US, eventually moving over 30 million copies worldwide. Slash's blistering guitar solos became the soundtrack to Teenage Rebellion, bedroom air guitar sessions, and strip club soundtracks across the globe. But the success came with a price. Behind the scenes, things were spiraling. Drugs weren't just part of the lifestyle, they were the lifestyle. Heroin, in particular, became a silent band member. By 1989, things had gotten so bad that during a Rolling Stones show where they were the opening act, Axl Rose threatened, right on stage, to quit the band if his bandmates didn't get clean. It wasn't just a dramatic moment, it was a public warning. The band was imploding from the inside out. Still, somehow, they pushed through. In 1991, Guns N' Roses embarked on the Use Your Illusion tour, a mammoth 2.5-year marathon across continents, paired with the release of 2 albums, Use Your Illusion 1 and Use Your Illusion 2. The albums dropped on the same day and debuted at Numb, 2 and No. 1 on the Billboard 200, a historic move that only solidified their status as rock gods. But the momentum didn't last. Izzy Stradlin, the band's rhythm guitarist and one of its original members, abruptly quit mid-tour. Internally, power struggles and creative tensions were growing toxic. Their next release? The Spaghetti Incident? In 1993, a covers album of punk and glam rock tracks felt more like an afterthought than a proper follow-up. It was a whimper compared to their previous roars. July 17, 1993, marked Slash's final show with the band. And though the band didn't officially break up right then, everyone could feel the end creeping in. In 1996, Slash publicly announced he was out. Rumors flew, artistic clashes with Axl, creative burnout, and personality blow-ups. But Slash set the record straight in his 2007 autobiography. According to him, it wasn't just Axl's growing ego, it was the contracts Axl made the band sign, reducing them to hired hands. It was the endless waiting hours before every show because Axl refused to go on stage on time. And it was the loss of Izzy and Adler, the core brotherhood that once kept it all together. Still, Slash didn't slow down. After leaving Guns N' Roses, he poured his energy into new projects. First came Slash's Snake Pit, a gritty, bluesy, hard rock band that allowed him to flex in ways GNR never did. Then came Slash's Blues Ball, a cover band that paid homage to the music that raised him. But his most acclaimed project, post-GNR, came in 2003 when he formed Velvet Revolver alongside Duff McKagan and ex-Stone Temple Pilots frontman Scott Weiland. It wasn't just another band, it was a comeback. Critics and fans loved it. Their debut album, Contraband, went double platinum and proved that Slash still had plenty of fire in him. On his own, he kept the momentum going. In 2010, he dropped his first self-titled solo album, enlisting a lineup of all-star collaborators like Ozzy Osbourne, Fergie, and Myles Kennedy. In 2012, Apocalyptic Love followed, cementing his musical partnership with Kennedy and earning rave reviews from critics and fans alike. Slash had become one of the rare rockers who could leave a legendary band and still command a stadium. Then, in a move no one quite saw coming, the past came knocking. In 2016, 2 decades after walking away, Slash rejoined Guns N' Roses for a massive 21-city North American reunion tour. With shows in Las Vegas, Coachella, and Mexico City, it was a full-circle moment that brought millions of fans back into the fold. Through breakups, addiction, rebirths, and reunions, Slash didn't just survive the rock and roll machine, he outplayed it. His name became more than just a stage moniker. It became shorthand for a guitar style that's as unmistakable as it is untamed. The top hat, the cigarette, the Les Paul. It's all part of a legacy carved from chaos. Slash's addiction. In the 1980s, if there was one thing almost every band had in common, it was the addictive use of substances. One of the most haunting examples of Slash's addiction came in the early 90s. During what should have been the prime of his career, he had injected himself with speedballs, lethal combinations of heroin and cocaine, and collapsed, completely unresponsive, in a hotel hallway. His heart stopped, and paramedics had to revive him. But this wasn't the only time he nearly died. It was just one of many nights where the line between life and death blurred, and somehow he walked away. From Guns N' Roses' wild glory days to the darkness that nearly consumed him, Slash's story of addiction and recovery remains as raw as any guitar solo he ever played. Slash later admitted that the substance abuse wasn't glamorous or rebellious, it came from boredom. Long tours, hours off stage with nothing to do, and endless access to excess had created the perfect storm. He reflected that he got into booze and drugs mostly just to kill time, but it escalated quickly. Before he knew it, he was locked in a real physical and psychological addiction. There was nothing casual about it. The way he drank was almost ritualistic. He claimed to go through 1 or 2 bottles of Jack Daniels a night, sometimes even a half-gallon, until he was drunk all the time. And that was just the alcohol. Heroin, pills, cocaine, everything collided in a chaotic swirl that blurred days and wrecked nights. By the late 90s, he was spiraling hard. The rock star lifestyle had become a death sentence in disguise. In 2001, at only 35 years old, he was diagnosed with cardiomyopathy, a form of heart failure directly tied to his substance abuse. Doctors implanted a defibrillator and gave him only weeks to live. His body was shutting down from the inside. The fact that he recovered at all felt almost supernatural. Still, for a while, even that wasn't enough to stop him. Slash's persona had become so intertwined with the rock and roll archetype, chaotic, unhinged, seductive in its danger, that breaking away felt nearly impossible. But it also nearly became his undoing. He and his bandmates weren't just known for their talent. They were known for their sheer disregard for survival. They had, as one journalist put it, an appetite for self-destruction. The real shift came in July 2006, when Slash checked himself into rehab and made a decision that would change the rest of his life. He later explained that first, he kicked the drugs, and then started the work of figuring out why he kept ending up in the same patterns. He spent 30 full days in rehab, gave himself over to the process completely, and from that moment on, remained sober. His first time back on stage post-rehab was with Velvet Revolver. Still new to sobriety, still adjusting, but alive, clear-headed, and for the first time in years, fully present. That moment became a turning point. Looking back, he acknowledged just how lucky he had been. He recognized that he could easily have died or landed in prison. For years, he woke up in hospital rooms with no memory of how he got there. Eventually, the frequency of those near-death experiences made something inside him snap. He began to realize that these brushes with death had become way too common, and he might have already used up every last trump card. Even those around him feared the worst. Tom Zutaut, the record executive who had signed Guns N' Roses, once admitted he lived in constant dread of waking up to headlines that Slash had overdosed. By 2025, Slash had been sober for nearly 2 decades. His transformation wasn't just about staying away from substances, it was about becoming someone new entirely. He credited his second marriage and, above all, fatherhood for that. Becoming a dad to his 2 sons changed the equation. Sobriety wasn't just a goal, it was a non-negotiable responsibility. The old life of chaos didn't fit anymore. Not with tiny humans watching his every move. He had once risked everything for the high. Now he was risking everything to stay grounded for them. Slash's love life and messy divorce. Just like his music career, Slash's love life was once loud, wild, and messy, just like the music he played. He dated models, partied hard, and lived the kind of rock star life people read about in tabloids. But even he admitted that after years of chasing women like they were prizes, something shifted. In an interview with the Los Angeles Times, he said those flings didn't mean anything in the end. It felt empty. He didn't want quick thrills anymore. He wanted something real. That turning point came when he met Perla Ferrar in 1997. It wasn't planned. They bumped into each other at an after-party in Vegas, and again later at the Sunset Marquis. This time, they clicked. Both were heavy partiers, but there was something deeper between them. Perla had a strong personality, even bolder than Slash's. She could hold her own, and that caught his attention. In 2001, they got married in Hawaii and later had 2 sons, London and Cash. But their marriage wasn't all smooth. When Slash's health took a serious hit in 2006, he was just 35 when doctors told him he had heart failure caused by years of drug and alcohol abuse. Perla stood by him. That same year, he entered rehab and made the decision to change his life. He got sober, focused on being a better man, and leaned on Perla and his children for strength. Perla played a big part in that. Slash once said she was one of the most exciting and strong women he'd ever known, and during his recovery, she helped keep him steady. Being a father also changed him. For once, he wasn't living for the next party. He was living for his kids. But the relationship didn't last forever. In 2010, Slash filed for divorce, but later changed his mind and stayed. In 2011, they even renewed their vows in Ibiza. Perla wore her original wedding dress, and for a moment, it seemed like they had worked things out. 3 years later, it fell apart for good. In December 2014, Slash filed for divorce again and listed their separation date as June 15th. Things quickly got messy. As the legal process went on, Slash's team claimed that the marriage might not have been valid in the first place. Why? Because Perla's earlier divorce from a previous marriage wasn't fully completed before she married Slash. Perla said the mistake had been fixed years ago, with a judge officially ending her first marriage retroactively. But Slash tried to use the legal mix-up to argue that they were never truly married, which could have affected how much money Perla could claim in the divorce. In the end, they reached a settlement. Slash agreed to pay Perla $6.6 million plus $100,000 a month in spousal support and $39,000 a month in child support. Their children would also receive 1.8% of Slash's income until 2036. Slash got to keep his guitar collection, worth nearly $2 million. Not long after, Slash reconnected with someone from his past, Megan Hodges. They had first met in 1989, but it wasn't until 2015 that they found each other again. This time, it was different. Their relationship wasn't loud or flashy. Friends said it was quiet, sweet, and full of love that had grown over time. Slash sent her flowers every month, and they kept their lives private from the press. The two are still together today and have 2 beautiful kids together. But while Slash was finding peace in his personal life, the same couldn't be said for the band that made him famous. Behind the music and leather jackets, Guns N' Roses had a history so chaotic, so out of control, it made their lyrics look tame. From the moment they hit the scene, they weren't just breaking records, they were breaking rules and leaving a trail of controversy that the world is still talking about. Guns N' Roses. Wildly. Controversial moments. Guns N' Roses didn't just make noise on stage. They built a legacy of chaos, scandal, and unapologetic recklessness that would have had them canceled 100 times over in today's world. Even before their debut album changed rock forever, they were living like legends. Loud, wild, and completely off the rails. It started in 1985 with what should have been their first tour. Duff McKagan, the bassist fresh from Seattle's punk scene, helped book a string of West Coast shows with the Fastbacks. But days before departure, Tracy E. Guns and Rob Gardner quit. With the tour hanging by a thread, McKagan called in Slash and Steven Adler. The new lineup borrowed a car and a van for their gear and roadies, and set off. The car broke down mid-trip, so the band hitchhiked the rest of the way, gearless and late. When they finally arrived at the venue, Gorilla Gardens, they had to borrow instruments from the Fastbacks. They didn't get paid. The remaining shows were canceled. Backstage, Axl Rose and McKagan were so furious they tossed lit matches into trash cans full of paper towels. Nothing caught fire, but it came close. That disastrous trip somehow sealed their bond. With no income and no record deal, they moved into a cramped, windowless rehearsal space known as Gardner Studio. It had no bathroom, only a shared one down the hall, which quickly turned into a cesspool of sex, drugs, and endless partying. It was here they wrote most of Appetite for Destruction and the B-sides. They also sold drugs, drank themselves unconscious, and robbed groupies while living on $3.75 a day. Enough for biscuits at Denny's and a bottle of Thunderbird. Sometimes they lined up at the Salvation Army or hit a local gay club with a cheap buffet. Then came the moment that almost tore it all apart. A 15-year-old girl ended up at Gardner Studio one night. According to Slash's hazy memory, she had sexual intercourse with Axl in the loft, freaked out as the drugs wore off, and was thrown out, naked, into the streets of L.A. She later went to the police. When the LAPD arrived, Axl hid behind the band's equipment. Soon after, the band was told the girl's parents were pressing charges against both Axl and Slash for statutory R***E. The band laid low and stopped playing shows while things simmered. Eventually, the charges were dropped. They left Gardner Studio and moved in with Vicky Hamilton, their manager at the time. But their destructive habits didn't change. Somehow, despite, or maybe because of their reputation, labels started circling. Chrysalis Records offered them $400,000, but Axl wanted more creative control. He agreed to the deal only if the label's AANDR rep would walk naked down Sunset Boulevard. She didn't. Geffen ended up signing them instead for a much smaller $75,000 advance. That deal nearly collapsed, too. Hours before the signing meeting, Axl lost his contact lenses and refused to go until he found them. After searching through old clothes, the lenses turned up in a pair of pants, but Axl was missing. He was eventually spotted cross-legged on top of the Whiskey A Go-Go, completely zoned out. By mid-1986, with the deal in place, Geffen started looking for a producer. Kiss frontman Paul Stanley showed up for a meeting, but what he found shocked him. Izzy Stradlin was unconscious, drooling. Slash looked half dead. Axl played rough demos on a cassette deck. Stanley offered a few suggestions on the song Night Rain. That was enough for the band. Slash later spread rumors Stanley was gay, burning the bridge with a flamethrower. Violence and chaos were just part of the brand. At a show in Hollywood, a girl in the crowd sprayed beer and tossed bottles at the band. Axl responded by hitting her with a mic stand. The girl turned out to be fellow musician Bob Forrest's girlfriend. After the show, when Forrest confronted Axl backstage, it erupted into a full-blown fight involving a security guard, their photographer getting kicked in the groin, and a drum stand flying through the air. While Appetite was being mixed in New York, Axl decided one track needed a rawer edge, literally. For Rocket Queen, he wanted real sex noises layered into the bridge. Adriana Smith, a dancer who had been dating Adler but was angry at him, agreed. She and Axl had sex in the vocal booth, while engineers recorded it in the dark, behind a panel. The final track included her moans. Adler didn't seem shocked. It wasn't the fact Axl did it, but that he picked his girl that stung. When Appetite for Destruction finally dropped, it didn't explode. In fact, it flopped. Stores refused to stock the original cover, an image of a robot about to assault a woman. So, the band switched to a black cover featuring skulls. Sales were slow. MTV wouldn't touch their videos. The album debuted at number 182 on Billboard. At that rate, Geffen was ready to cut their losses. But Zoothout, their AA Ender rep, begged David Geffen to intervene. Geffen called MTV himself. Welcome to the Jungle got a single 4 a.m. airing. The band threw a party to watch it, complete with cookies and milk. Neighbors called the cops. When the sheriff arrived and saw the innocent scene, they shrugged and left. The video caught fire. MTV added it to regular rotation. Sweet Child O' Mine followed. Within a year, Appetite hit number 1. The band that almost went down in flames became the biggest in the world. Looking back, it's staggering how close they came to blowing it all. They picked fights, got into legal messes, insulted industry giants, sabotaged their own deals, and pushed limits with zero restraint. But somehow, that madness became magic. Appetite for Destruction would go on to sell over 30 million copies worldwide, and Guns N' Roses would become one of the most iconic and notorious bands in history. And maybe the wildest part? They did everything wrong and still got it right. But Slash has since come a long way from his wild, drug-fueled days. Now he's mostly at home unwinding and building a beautiful life with his wife and kids. But while Slash might be settled now, we can't help but wonder, who was the love of Slash's life? In a 2011 interview with The Guardian, Slash was asked a simple question. Who was the greatest love of his life? He didn't pause or try to be poetic. He just said, "My kids." But the real story of Slash's love life is a bit more complicated than that. Because if you look closely, there were two women who truly left their mark on him, Perla Ferrar and Megan Hodges. Both shaped him in different ways, at different points in his life. And both mattered. Perla Ferrar was the woman who came into his life during the wildest years. They met in 1997, and their connection was instant. She was bold, outspoken, and just as fiery as he was. Together, they partied hard. But when things got serious, so did their bond. They got married in 2001, had 2 sons, and tried to build something real. When Slash faced a health scare at 35 and checked into rehab, Perla stood by him. She supported him as he worked through addiction, cleaned up his life, and learned how to be a present father. Slash once said that Perla was one of the most exciting, yet loyal people he'd ever met. With her, he didn't just find love, he found stability for the first time. Their marriage had its ups and downs, including a very public and messy divorce. But for over a decade, she was the person he leaned on. Then there's Megan Hodges, the woman who came before all the fame and returned after it. Slash and Megan first met in 1989, back when Guns N' Roses were still rising. They had a spark back then, but life pulled them in different directions. Years later, after Slash's marriage ended, they found their way back to each other. This time, things were different. The chaos was behind him. The tours, the headlines, the rehab, the divorce. It was all in the past. And what Megan and Slash built was quieter, simpler. They weren't making noise in tabloids. They were living, posting sweet notes, sending each other flowers, and holding on to a love that didn't need to be loud to be strong. So when Slash said his kids were the greatest love of his life, he wasn't wrong. But if you really want to understand his heart, you have to look at the two women who helped shape him. One who helped him survive the madness, and one who helped him find peace after it. Which amongst the two women do you think is the greatest love of Slash's life? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.